Introduction to TLS encryption. Welcome to the channel. Please consider subscribing. I produce videos daily covering a wide variety of cloud topics with focus on networking. Also, hit the bell icon to get notified of new videos. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most fundamental aspects of secure internet communication, TLS encryption. Transport Layer Security, or TLS, is the protocol that secures virtually every HTTPS connection you make on the web. What makes TLS particularly elegant is its dual approach to encryption. It cleverly combines the strengths of both asymmetric and symmetric encryption to create a system that's both secure and efficient. Think about this for a moment. When you connect to your bank's website, how does your browser establish a secure connection with a server it's never communicated with before? How do they agree on encryption keys without anyone listening in being able to intercept them? This is the fundamental challenge TLS solves, and it does so through a carefully orchestrated dance between asymmetric and symmetric encryption. The genius of TLS lies in using asymmetric encryption, public key cryptography, for the initial handshake and key exchange, then switching to symmetric encryption for the actual data transfer. This hybrid approach gives us the best of both worlds: the security of being able to establish encrypted communication with unknown parties, and the speed of symmetric encryption for bulk data transfer. Throughout this presentation, we will explore how this works in practice, examine the differences between various TLS versions, and understand why this dual approach is so critical for modern internet security. We will see real examples of TLS handshakes, understand the role of certificates, and discover how the protocol has evolved from secure sockets layer to TLS 1.3. The two types of encryption. Before we dive into how TLS works, let's establish a solid understanding of the two types of encryption it uses. This foundation is crucial because the entire security model of TLS depends on understanding when and why we use each type. Symmetric encryption is like having a shared secret between two parties. Imagine you and a friend have identical keys to a lockbox. You can lock a message in the box, and your friend can unlock it with their identical key. The same key is used for both encryption and decryption, hence, symmetric. Common symmetric algorithms include AES, or Advanced Encryption Standard, which might use key sizes of 128, 192, or 256 bits. The beauty of symmetric encryption is its speed. Modern processors can encrypt and decrypt symmetric data incredibly quickly, making it perfect for streaming video, large file transfers, or any bulk data operation. Asymmetric encryption, on the other hand, uses a pair of mathematically related keys, a public key and a private key. Think of it like a mailbox. Anyone can drop a letter in, encrypt with the public key, but only the person with the mailbox key can retrieve it, decrypt with the private key. RSA, elliptic curve ECDSA, and Diffie-Hellman are common asymmetric algorithms. What is fascinating is that even though the keys are mathematically related, it is computationally infeasible to derive the private key from the public key. Here's the critical trade-off. Asymmetric encryption is roughly 1,000 times slower than symmetric encryption. Encrypting just a few megabytes with RSA would take a painfully long time compared to AES. However, asymmetric encryption solves the key distribution problem. You can safely share your public key with the entire world without compromising security. This is why TLS is brilliant. It uses asymmetric encryption only for the initial handshake, to securely exchange symmetric keys. Then, it switches to fast symmetric encryption for everything else. It is like using an armored car, slow but secure, to deliver a sports car, fast and efficient, that you will actually use for your journey. The TLS handshake process. Now let's walk through the TLS handshake process step by step. This is where the magic happens, where two parties who have never communicated before establish a secure channel. I'll use a real-world analogy to make this clearer. Imagine you're trying to establish a secure communication channel with a bank you've never visited before. The process begins with the client hello message. Your browser essentially says, "Hello server, I would like to establish a secure connection. Here are the TLS versions I support, the cipher suites I can use, and a random number I have generated." This random number is crucial. It will be used later to generate the session keys. The cipher suites are like saying, "I can speak these languages for our secure conversation." The server responds with a server hello, selecting the highest TLS version both parties support and choosing a cipher suite from the client's list. It also sends its own random number. Next, the server sends its certificate. This certificate contains the server's public key and is signed by a certificate authority, CA, that your browser trusts. It's like the bank showing you their official charter signed by the government. Your browser verifies this certificate by checking the CA's signature using its public key, which is pre-installed in your browser. This creates a chain of trust. You trust the CA vouches for the server, and therefore, you can trust the server. If this verification succeeds, your browser now has the server's legitimate public key. Next comes the key exchange. In older TLS versions, the client generates a pre-master secret, encrypts it with the server's public key, and sends it over. Only the server can decrypt this with its private key. Both parties then use this pre-master secret along with the random numbers exchanged earlier to derive the actual session keys. In newer versions like TLS 1.3, we use Diffie-Hellman key exchange, where both parties contribute to generating the shared secret without ever transmitting it. Finally, both parties send a finished message, encrypted with the newly established session keys. If both can decrypt and verify these messages, the handshake is complete. From this point forward, all communication uses symmetric encryption with the session keys. The entire handshake typically takes just a few hundred milliseconds, but it establishes a secure channel that could last for hours. Symmetric encryption for bulk data. Once the TLS handshake completes, we enter the bulk data transfer phase. This is where symmetric encryption truly shines. Let me explain why this transition is so important and how it works in practice. During the handshake, both parties derived identical session keys. Actually, it is typically multiple keys. One for client-to-server encryption, one for server-to-client encryption, and additional keys for message authentication. This separation ensures that even if one key is somehow compromised, the damage is limited. These keys are used with symmetric algorithms like AES-GCM, Galois/counter mode, or CHA-20 Poly 1305. The performance difference is staggering. While RSA-2048 might process a few thousand operations per second, AES can encrypt gigabytes per second on modern hardware. Many processors even have special instructions, like AES-NI, specifically designed to accelerate AES operations. This is why you can stream 4K video over HTTPS without your computer breaking a sweat. But it's not just about encryption. Modern cipher suites are authenticated encryption modes, meaning they provide both confidentiality and integrity. AES-GCM, for example, not only encrypts your data but also produces an authentication tag that proves the data hasn't been tampered with. It's like sending a locked box that would show obvious signs if someone tried to pick the lock. The session keys have a limited lifetime. They might be rotated every hour, every gigabyte of data, or based on other criteria. This limits the damage if a key is ever compromised. An attacker would only be able to decrypt a small portion of the communication. Some implementations even provide perfect forward secrecy, where past communications remain secure even if the server's private key is later compromised. What's remarkable is that all of this happens transparently. When you're browsing a website, uploading files, or streaming content, the symmetric encryption and decryption happen in real time without you noticing any delay. The data flows through the encryption layer like water through a pipe, protected from eavesdroppers but still flowing freely between you and the server. Evolution from Secure Sockets Layer to TLS 1.2. The journey from secure sockets layer to TLS is a fascinating evolution in cryptographic protocol design. Each version learned from the vulnerabilities and limitations of its predecessors, gradually building the robust security framework we rely on today. Secure Sockets Layer was developed by Netscape in the mid-1990s. Secure Sockets Layer 2.0, released in 1995, was the first publicly released version, but it had serious security flaws. It used weak message authentication code construction, had no protection against man-in-the-middle attacks during cipher negotiation, and used the same key for authentication and encryption. Secure Sockets Layer 3.0, 1996, fixed many of these issues but still had fundamental weaknesses that would later be exploited in attacks like Poodle. TLS 1.0, released in 1999, was essentially Secure Sockets Layer 3.1 with minor improvements. The changes were subtle but important. These included improved MAC construction, a different pseudorandom function, and mandatory support for Diffie-Hellman key exchange. However, it still supported many weak ciphers for backward compatibility. Think of it as renovating an old house. The structure was improved, but some old, weak foundations remained. TLS 1.1, 2006, added protection against CBC, cipher block chaining, attacks by using explicit IVs, initialization vectors, instead of implicit ones. It also removed support for export-grade cryptography, which was weak encryption that the U.S. government once required for software exported outside the country. These export ciphers were a relic of the crypto wars of the 1990s and had become a serious vulnerability. TLS 1.2, 2008, was a major leap forward. It introduced support for authenticated encryption modes like AES-GCM, replaced MD5/SHA-1 with SHA-256 in the pseudorandom function, and added support for more modern cryptographic algorithms. Perhaps most importantly, it made the protocol more flexible, allowing new cipher suites to be added without changing the protocol itself. The handshake in TLS 1.2 involves multiple round trips: client hello/server hello, certificate exchange, key exchange, and finished messages. While secure, this back and forth adds latency. Throughout this evolution, we see a constant battle between maintaining backward compatibility and improving security. Each version had to balance supporting older systems while moving towards stronger cryptography. This tension would ultimately lead to the radical redesign we see in TLS 1.3, which we will explore next. TLS 1.3, the modern standard. TLS 1.3, finalized in 2018, represents the most significant overhaul of the protocol since its inception. The designers took a bold approach. Instead of incrementally improving TLS 1.2, they fundamentally reimagined how secure connections should work in the modern Internet. Let me walk you through the revolutionary changes. The most visible improvement is the streamlined handshake. TLS 1.3 reduces the handshake from 2 round trips to just 1 in most cases. How? By having the client send key exchange information in the very first message. The client essentially says, "Here are the protocols I support, and by the way, here's my Diffie-Hellman public key for each group I support." The server can immediately compute the shared secret and send back encrypted data in its first response. This 1 RTT, 1 round trip time, handshake cuts connection establishment time in half. But it gets better. TLS 1.3 introduces 0 RTT resumption for repeat connections. If you've connected to a server before, you can send encrypted data in your very first message, without waiting for any handshake at all. Imagine walking into a bank where you're already a customer. Instead of showing ID and establishing your identity, you can immediately start your transaction. This is game-changing for web performance, especially on mobile networks with high latency. Security improvements in TLS 1.3 are equally dramatic. The protocol removed a massive amount of legacy cryptography. For example, gone are RSA key exchange, CBC mode ciphers, MD5, SHA-1, and various other weakened algorithms. Only 5 cipher suites remain, all using authenticated encryption. This less is more approach eliminates entire classes of vulnerabilities. If the weak algorithms don't exist in the protocol, they can't be exploited. Perfect forward secrecy, or PFS, is now mandatory. Every connection uses ephemeral keys through a Diffie-Hellman exchange. This means that even if a server's long-term private key is compromised, past communications remain secure. The protocol also encrypts more of the handshake itself, which hides information like the server certificate from eavesdroppers. This improves privacy and makes traffic analysis more difficult. The simplification extends to the state machine as well. TLS 1.2 had a complex set of handshake states that could be combined in various ways, leading to implementation bugs. TLS 1.3 has just 3 basic handshake flows: full handshake, resumption handshake, and zero RTT. This simplicity makes the protocol easier to implement correctly and harder to attack. Cipher suites and key exchange. Cipher suites are the building blocks of TLS security. They define exactly which algorithms will be used for each aspect of the secure connection. Understanding cipher suites is like understanding the ingredients in a recipe. Each component serves a specific purpose, and they must work together harmoniously. In TLS 1.2 and earlier, a cipher suite name like TLS ECDHERSA with AES 128 GCMSHA 256 tells a complete story. Breaking it down, ECDHE, elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman ephemeral, is the key exchange mechanism. RSA is how the server proves its identity. AES 128 GCM is the symmetric encryption algorithm, with 128-bit keys, in Galois/counter mode. And SHA-256 is the hash function for the MAC. It is like a detailed recipe, specifying every ingredient and cooking method. The key exchange mechanism is particularly crucial. RSA key exchange, used in older cipher suites, works by having the client encrypt the pre-master secret with the server's public key. Simple and elegant, but it has a fatal flaw: it doesn't provide forward secrecy. If the server's private key is ever compromised, all past communications can be decrypted. It's like using the same lock on your diary for years. If someone gets the key, they can read everything you've ever written. Diffie-Hellman DH key exchange solves this problem through mathematical elegance. Both parties generate temporary key pairs and exchange public keys. Through the magic of discrete logarithm mathematics, they can both compute the same shared secret without ever transmitting it. Ephemeral Diffie-Hellman DHE or ECDHE generates new keys for every connection, ensuring forward secrecy. Even if you steal the server's private key and record all traffic, you cannot decrypt past sessions because those ephemeral keys are gone forever. TLS 1.3 radically simplified cipher suites. Instead of specifying every component, TLS 1.3 cipher suites only specify the symmetric encryption algorithm and hash function. For example, TLS AES 128 GCMSHA 256. The key exchange is negotiated separately and must use Diffie-Hellman. Authentication is tied to the certificate type. This separation of concerns makes the protocol more flexible and easier to understand. Modern best practices strongly favor elliptic curve cryptography for key exchange. ECDHE with curves like X25519 provides the same security as traditional DH but with much smaller keys and faster computation. A 256-bit elliptic curve key provides security comparable to a 3072-bit RSA key. It's like getting the strength of a heavyweight boxer in the body of a featherweight, providing all the security with much better performance. Performance and security trade-offs. The delicate balance between performance and security in TLS is a fascinating study in engineering trade-offs. Every decision in the protocol design affects both how fast connections can be established and how secure they are against various attacks. Let me share some real-world insights into these trade-offs. The most obvious trade-off is in key sizes. Larger keys provide more security but require more computation. RSA 2048 is considered secure today, but RSA 4096 is even more secure, yet it is 4 times slower for signing operations. For comparison, on a modern server, RSA 2048 might handle 5,000 signatures per second, while RSA 4096 drops to about 1,200. For a busy website, this difference in CPU usage is substantial. This is why the industry is moving toward elliptic curve cryptography. ECC provides equivalent security with much smaller keys and faster operations. Session resumption mechanisms show another interesting trade-off. TLS session caching allows clients to resume previous sessions without a full handshake, dramatically improving performance. However, this requires servers to maintain state, which can be challenging at scale. Session tickets solve this by encrypting session state and giving it to the client to store, but this introduces new security considerations. For example, if the ticket encryption key is compromised, forward secrecy is lost for those sessions. The zero RTT feature in TLS 1.3 is perhaps the ultimate performance optimization, allowing data to be sent immediately without any handshake delay. But it comes with security caveats. Zero RTT data can be replayed by an attacker. While TLS 1.3 includes mechanisms to detect and limit replay attacks, applications must be designed carefully to ensure that replayed requests do not cause problems. It is perfect for idempotent operations like loading a web page, but dangerous for operations like transferring money. Certificate chain verification is another performance consideration. Validating a certificate requires checking the entire chain up to a trusted root, verifying signatures at each step. OCSP, which stands for Online Certificate Status Protocol, stapling helps by having the server provide proof of certificate validity, which saves the client from making additional requests. However, this adds complexity and requires servers to periodically fetch OCSP responses. Even the choice of symmetric cipher affects the trade-off. AES is incredibly fast with hardware support. AES-NI instructions, but on devices without hardware acceleration, ChaCha20 Poly 1305 can be 3 times faster. Google developed ChaCha20 specifically for mobile devices where battery life is crucial. It's a reminder that performance means different things in different contexts. Sometimes it's about throughput, sometimes about latency, and sometimes about power consumption. Implementation examples. Let's get practical and look at how TLS is actually implemented and configured in real-world scenarios. Understanding the theory is important, but seeing how it translates into actual configurations and commands will make these concepts concrete. Starting with web servers, let's look at an Nginx configuration. The Secure Sockets Layer Protocols Directive specifies which TLS versions to support. Modern best practice is Secure Sockets Layer Protocols TLS version 1.2 TLS version 1.3 : Notice, we're explicitly excluding older versions. The Secure Sockets Layer Ciphers Directive is where you define your cipher suite preferences. A modern configuration might look like Secure Sockets Layer Ciphers ECDHE ECDSAAES 128 GCMSHA 256 ECDHE RSAAES 128 GCMSHA 256 ECDHE ECDSAAES 256 GCMSHA 384 ECDHE RSAAES 256 GCMSHA 384 : The order matters. Servers typically choose the first cipher that both parties support. OpenSSL commands are invaluable for testing and debugging TLS. The command OpenSSLS client connect example.com: 443 TLS 1.3 establishes a TLS 1.3 connection and shows you the entire handshake process. You will see the cipher suite negotiated, the certificate chain, and even the raw handshake messages if you add the debug flag. For checking what ciphers a server supports, open SSLS Client Connect example.com:443 cipher ECDHERSAES256GCMSHA384 tests if a specific cipher is available. Certificate generation often trips people up. For testing, you can generate a self-signed certificate with OpenSSL Rec X509 new key RSA:2048 keyout key.pem out cert.pem days 365 nodes. In production, you would generate a certificate signing request, CSR, with OpenSSL Rec new key RSA:2048 nodes keyout server.keyout-server.csr. Then submit this CSR to a certificate authority. The CA validates your identity and returns a signed certificate. Modern deployments often use Let's Encrypt for free, automated certificates. The CertBot tool handles the entire process. For example, CertBot Nginx-d example.com will obtain a certificate, configure Nginx, and set up automatic renewal. It uses the ACME protocol to prove domain ownership, typically by placing a temporary file on your web server that lets Encrypt servers verify. For debugging TLS issues, Wireshark is indispensable. It can decode TLS handshakes, though not the encrypted data, of course, and show you exactly what's happening on the wire. You can see each handshake message, which ciphers are offered and selected, and identify where connections are failing. For development, you can even configure Wireshark with your server's private key to decrypt traffic for analysis, though this should never be done in production. Best practices and future directions. As we wrap up our deep dive into TLS encryption, let's consolidate the best practices for implementing TLS today and look toward what's coming next. The landscape of internet security is constantly evolving, and staying current with best practices is crucial for maintaining robust security. First and foremost, use TLS 1.3 whenever possible. The performance improvements alone make it worthwhile, but the security enhancements are even more important. If you must support TLS 1.2 for compatibility, ensure you're using only strong cipher suites with forward secrecy. Disable TLS 1.1 and below. They're obsolete and have known vulnerabilities. Many major browsers have already dropped support for these older versions. Certificate management is critical. Use certificates from trusted CAs. Implement certificate transparency monitoring to detect mis-issued certificates, and automate certificate renewal to avoid outages. Consider using ECDSA certificates instead of RSA. They are smaller and faster. For internal services, consider using mutual TLS where both client and server authenticate with certificates. Enable HTTP Strict Transport Security (HSTS) with a long max age and include subdomains. This tells browsers to always use HTTPS for your site, preventing downgrade attacks. Consider HSTS preloading, where your domain is hard-coded into browsers as HTTPS only. Also, implement certificate pinning for mobile apps to prevent man-in-the-middle attacks, though be careful with rotation strategies. Looking forward, post-quantum cryptography is the next frontier. Current public key algorithms will be vulnerable to quantum computers, so NIST is standardizing quantum-resistant algorithms. TLS will need to adapt to support these new algorithms while maintaining backward compatibility. Hybrid modes that use both classical and post-quantum algorithms are likely during the transition. The future also holds improvements in protocol efficiency. QUIC, which underlies HTTP/3, integrates transport and cryptographic handshakes, achieving zero RTT connections more reliably than TLS over TCP. Encrypted client Hello, ECH, is being standardized to hide even more information from eavesdroppers, including the server name indication. Remember, TLS is just one layer of security. Defense in depth remains crucial. Use TLS alongside other security measures like authentication, authorization, input validation, and security monitoring. The elegance of TLS's dual encryption approach has stood the test of time, evolving from SSL's humble beginnings to today's streamlined TLS 1.3, and it will continue to adapt to meet tomorrow's security challenges. Thank you for your attendance. Please consider subscribing to the channel.